American death aesthetics and their embodied metaphors. What does that mean? An embodied metaphor, I think, is like, I don't know. Whenever we kind of humans make sense of things by using metaphors like, oh, this is dark, this is tall, this is a high and mighty thing, but this is a very low and lowly thing, and it's all based on the perception of our bodies, you know? Because if it weren't for the fact that we were, tall and balanced and like, standing upright, we wouldn't have these metaphors. One of the things that was brought up in the text that I'm referring to was by Erin Kidd was something where it's like, if you told an ant, down with the queen, right? It's a lot of a different meaning versus if you told a human being down with the queen, because down is just like, oh, we're going to safety, we're gonna go protect the queen, versus like down with the queen to us is like, oh, bring her down, because down to us is like taking away our sense of balance, taking away our sense of like standing upright, even independence in a way.
I think you also have to take into account these ant queens actually do work. They can contribute something
to the society.
They don't put themselves above anyone else to then be taken down.
The theme of monarchy has been coming up a lot with death in the U.S. or like, yeah, or how we interpret it, because it's really based off of a sort of hierarchy. Like, here we think a lot about death as like, oh, what do we lose? What do we no longer have? It's interesting. The death aesthetics of the United States. I think the next image I'm going to pull up is a pretty good example of sort of what is evoked when you think of death in the U.S., because we do use caskets a lot here. We bury people underground in the darkness. You even have the color purple, which is interesting. You have ruins, like the ending of an era, right? You have someone holding up a light to sort of lead this spirit up, and what does it mean to send something upwards, right? It's funky. Spirits going up. Evokes a lot of imagery of Catholicism, and it makes me question why do we think that spirits staying within us is such a bad thing? 'Cause
I'm not sure if necessarily it's viewed as the spirit being in us is bad, but more that placing the spirit on a sort of pedestal, I think makes it easy for people to then want to disregard the body. They say like, oh, the flesh is weak, we're from dust and we'll return to dust, and kind of as ways to put it down. But if anything, that's more of a reason to like, embrace the body, take care of it, feel good wherever you can. I mean, because even with the Bible, the story of Jesus resurrecting after 3 days, it's, whether taken literal or as a metaphor, like what is that saying about the physical body? Because it's not like God ever went anywhere or that Jesus would ever go anywhere after death. It was still with the people, but no, the physical body came back to kind of show like, oh, death couldn't stop him. Because like the roots are even that deep of just like death as something to conquer.
Yeah, like there's a change in us after death happens. We sort of separate death from the self a lot. Almost like it can't happen, and when it does happen, then we lose purpose because we can no longer do something.
Because we're stuck in the ego, I feel. Because you need death to have a new beginning for anything. Like, death isn't... To think of death as purely the end, hard period, is to limit your perspective to, I guess, like, just the here and now.
Mm.
Which is like, not even taking into account, I don't know, you tomorrow, or you... It's trying to preserve things too much. It's worrying about... It's trying to resist death. It's to resist change because we view things changing as bad, because in the West I feel like a lot of our self-importance comes from how much we can dominate or control either others or the world around us, be it through capitalism, people kind of throwing their lives away working, be it the environment we, cut down all the trees and
trees
forests.
and
We make
forests,
everything
we make everything.
hard, stone, right angles, the temperature controlled.
There's a sense of wanting to dominate over everything, but death is this one thing where it's like you can't take control over it. And it's interesting you bring that up because it got me thinking about how expensive, how much are we willing to pay for, like, a coffin, right? Or, like, a casket. And it's funny that I look for, like, the most expensive to the least expensive. Why the Dominican casket gotta show up, bro? Why me?
Because that's how targeted ads work.
Stop, they're watching me. They got, like, the pink casket.
What do you
and
mean they're
everything,
watching
too.
you? No, they just see, this IP address has Googled Platanos like 40
40
times.
times.
Let's
Just kidding.
No, that's just
so good. My IP address is Googling how to cook Dominican food a lot. I'd be asking ChatGPT, like, to cook Dominican food for me, and whenever it makes a mistake, I'm like, I caught you, bro. I caught you. Yo. $5,000. People go in debt when they die. Like, imagine just going in debt after you die, putting your family in debt because you're like, yo, I need this. I need you to put my rotting dead body in this shiny, pearly casket because I need to make sure that I go up and into this sort of like mysticism of dying, right? Like, that sort of happens in a culture that sort of thinks that, like, once you die, you're ascending to heaven, and, like, there's this sort of mission after death. In a sense, I feel like we've all been trying to find meaningfulness in death, but specifically, like, it really reminds me of, like, the imagery of, like, the pearly white gates, put me in the pearly white casket, because those are the ones that are the most expensive as well. It's interesting. It's funky.
I'm curious what you mean by us trying to find meaningfulness in death, because I feel like that is the opposite of what a lot of people do. I feel like people try to find meaningness in life and to try to throw away death as everything, after you die, it will be good if you're good, if it'll be bad if you're bad, so just while you're on Earth now, find meaning, find, heavy quotes, what you're meant to do and what's a greater purpose, rather than just like, live, feel good. Take shit a day at a time. You don't know if you're going to get hit by a bus in 3 weeks, so what does it matter if you know what you're going to be doing in 7 years? Like, that's all just straight up assumption.
That is true. But it's also trying, that sort of, what am I going to do for the next 7 years? It's also the sense of, like, I need to be pure. I need to do all of the right things so that I can get to the right places, and, like,
It's all a very easy way to convince people that their suffering is okay, because once they're dead, things will be better. So suffer away in this life, whether it's, putting like 80 years into a dead-end job working in capitalism, whether it's dying for some, religious fundamentalist movement. Like, I mean, I don't know what I'm trying to say.
It's this... I think that every single culture has been trying to find that sort of, like, meaning around dying, and specifically, like, I guess, like, not to say there's some sort of Catholic guilt with dying, but I see that a lot with judgment. Like, you have, what is this, like, St. Peter or some shit, when he's, like
Angel Gabriel, I don't know.
Angel Gabriel, yeah, like, blowing the horn, so it's just, like, you showing up, you did all of the right things. I don't know. And the sense of purity when in death, because it has me thinking about the imagery of just, like, burying someone in a white dress, right? Mm-hmm. So I was thinking about weddings, right? And how in the Victorian era we sort of would have the phenomenon of women sewing up their own wedding dresses because you were supposed to, like, give birth to a child afterwards, right? Like, that's kind of what it was. And a lot of times women were dying in childbirth, and that's, like, another big phenomenon of death that people have been dealing with for a long time. It's sort of like having to deal with infant mortality, because, like, how does something that has done nothing wrong die, right?
I feel like a lot of it... What are my words? I feel like... in trying to find a meaning in death, it kind of puts a bit too much ego onto it.
Yeah.
Why did this death happen to me? Death is the one thing that connects every living thing ever. Everything ever will eventually end, and like it, why did my baby die? Who's to say there's a reason? Like it's. But no, you're right. It is a very Catholic thing. I mean, hey, we're, told that we're born with original sin. The infinitely passed down buck of like, oh man, these two naked people ate an apple and tried to blame each other, and because of that, you're dirty and unclean before you even have like a sentient thought. Like, no matter what you do, you're unclean, you're impure, you're just this. And then it makes it easy to like then endure any sort of pain in this life because, well, things will be better after you're dead. Like, you're supposed to be feeling like this because you're a garbage person. Instead of looking at death as a natural and completely accepted thing in life, like in some, I wouldn't necessarily say in some Latin American countries, but in, I forgot that one spot in Mexico where the little Santa Muerte, like chapel popped up, where it's all people that just, I mean, Santa Muerte in and of herself is indigenous people taking the imagery from colonizers, but putting their own meaning to it. And like the Catholic Church has like super talked down, like saying, oh no, she's not a saint, it's bad because death is bad, and Jesus, literally saying Jesus beat death by being resurrected, so death is not something to be worshipped. But you go and you see all the people who worship Santa Muerte, and it's all people who have been, I mean, for lack of a better word, been through shit. It's all people who want change. Want change to the point that there's nowhere else to turn. And
except
that's
to
death itself. Which
itself.
is, I mean, hey, change in and of itself.
Yeah. And
whether whatever brought you to her, I feel like when you stop trying to look at death in the, quote unquote meaningful sense of ego, of like, oh, like how right-wing Republicans will be like, all these kids who died from mass shootings will live on because we'll pass laws to let more people have guns, or we'll name the guns after them, or some fucking wild shit. But damn it, wait, I lost my train of thought. Choo-choo.
The mysticism of death, blaming people for the death. It got me thinking about like the imagery of the wedding dress and sort of like dying either after the wedding or during the wedding. It's like, you know how like children get baptized in like the white dress? I have a picture of me getting baptized in the white dress. It does evoke that sense of purity, and it also has me thinking about how we have used the body as well to evoke that sort of like sense of purity as whiteness, and also use that against people. But on the point of, this sort of purity of the recently married woman that has died, right? It got me thinking of La Pascualita, and how there's like the mysticism of this woman that died in Mexico, and that her mother, like recently after her wedding, and her mother had put up this mannequin in the shop, and everyone was like, oh, it looks very human, right? Maybe it's her mummified. But there is a big history of like women's bodies being sort of like embalmed and almost preserved after young death. And just like the sense of just like the needing to preserve the body for like, especially like in America.
I mean, under a patriarchy, that's all they see you as anyway, so they kind of prefer you in that sense.
Yeah.
Figure, and implying the whole white dress thing, under like the Western Catholicism or whatever, it's, technically you can only wear white if you're a virgin. So it's just implying this whole, like, I don't know, once something starts, once something ends, it's bad. It's either pure or it's nothing.
The absence of purity is nothing, right? And that had me thinking about the sort of the way that we approach this in folklore in the US, or I don't really know for any other culture, but I'm gonna talk for here because that's what I know. Like, sort of the ghost is the woman in white, right? The woman that is stuck here because of suffering, because there's 4 pixels in this image. I love it. Oh my god. Okay. Yeah, like the woman in white. First thing I think about is like she's stuck here. You know, like she has unfinished business. Heavy quotes. Like, why is it that that's such a big like cultural loss like thing where it's like unfinished business is the ghost. That's why they're here. We can't have a positive ghost.
Because why would anyone ever want to be dead? So it has to be like, oh, if the ghosts are here, it's because they hate death, because they're clinging to life. And even though we still want to say the ghost is like a bad thing and shouldn't be here, it's it's not like, oh, hey, the ghost missed us. Oh, that's Uncle Tony.
No.
Oh man, he liked the sauce.
He
was
liked the
blessing our
sauce.
sauce. No, it's a ghost is negative. Anything death related is negative. Be that I mean, hey, I was just reading that book about mushrooms, and it was talking about just different cultures around the world and the relationships to mushrooms, which in themselves are just, little homies of decay and change, and, are usually associated with death. And I don't think it's a coincidence. Like, most of the cultures that were more abrasive cultures that were mycelophilic, I think was the specific word. Cultures that were down with mushrooms were like lots of Central America, Latin America countries, and then Eastern Europe, Asia, and then the countries that were like heavily mycelophobic, like super anti-mushroom, was like Britain, and then because of that the US, and just the whole like, oh, there's the potential of you can die if you don't know what you're doing.
The poisonous mushrooms.
Versus, oh, there's a potential of that, so let's learn all about it from a super young age so that it doesn't happen. Because those sorts of poisonings from random mushrooms don't really happen in those countries. It just shows how everything that can be associated or connotated with death, decay, change is viewed as a negative, because here in the West, I feel like we have to try to beat death. I mean, that's capitalism's whole thing. Like, we're in debt as is, so like people will want to martyr themselves. Oh, I'm working my life away so that inheritance. I could leave this for my kids. So that my kids will have a better life. It's it's easy to put up with suffering. It's easy to agree that just like things are fine, this is how everything is supposed to be, and like things could be better in the future if I just martyr myself and die. Versus
accepting death as just as is. Like, this is a phenomenon, and whether or not like it happens, it's here. And I think that
why would people buy physical possessions if they embrace death? Why would people buy houses? Why would people own land that they want to then, quote unquote, own land? I own this dirt. You can't fucking own dirt. Columbus, I'll beat him up.
It reminds me of how much people want to leave a legacy. Like, what does that mean? What does it mean? Like, oh, I have a mission, I have a legacy,
I'm big baby, I'm scared of dying. Don't forget me.
Don't forget me.
Don't forget me.
Don't forget me. Yo, I was having a conversation with somebody the other day about this exact same topic, and like I kind of not got annoyed, but like I literally having a conversation with culture, and then like culture, the first thing says is just like, no, because like if I want to have like a legacy, I want to have like if I want to create something with a vision, then like I'm gonna then I how do I trust the next person that's gonna take on this vision? And I just kind of like looked at him and I'm like, well, what if you started looking at death from another perspective? What if you just thought of this quote unquote vision as something that is alive in and of itself, and that you can give to someone, and that they can also embrace? Like, who's to say that you can't also enjoy what this other person's input is? Why does it have to be about yourself strictly? Why does this image, this idea, have to be about yourself? If like, how do you even begin to think about what does the self mean?
Legacy, I feel like a legacy is just caring about people's perceptions. Just, oh, I want people to remember me when I'm gone. It's like, why don't you just care? Like, okay, what about like what you do now? How about what you're doing now? What people say about, not that what people say is matters, but like if that's what you care about. So much of things is just passing the buck to the future of like, I'm too afraid of change, so I want to do something that will at one point change something, but I'm gonna start at one point. Just avoiding actually addressing it. It reminded me. I don't know if you got to the episode. Futurama, ancient Egypt planet. Bender becomes a pharaoh, and like his giant pyramid or like statue of him is literally extends into space, and it drinks beer, breathes fire, and talks, and it just is on a cycle of saying "Remember me" and then burping fire, because that's all that is. People need to think about me, because if I don't remember I'm here, maybe I won't be a thing. Maybe no one is a thing. Maybe identity isn't real. Just smoke some weed.
I want to bring up a point about
magicians?
No, close. Embalmers. What is when you think about the living dead, right? Your first idea is just like Frankenstein's monster, like, oh, I put these pieces of dead body together to make this like thing I want control over.
Flesh devoid of soul.
Yeah, so like because of the Civil War, we needed to transport bodies, and we needed to preserve the way that we were transporting these bodies, so we started embalming them, and people were very content with that. So whereas we used to go from like, people would have home burials, people would prepare their dead at home. You now had to send somebody to FedEx your FedEx grandpappy.
Oh no, Dad exploded in Virginia.
He got hit by a cannonball. We need to get him
It was his own cannonball, because the cannons really sucked. We gotta ship him up to Maine?
We gotta ship him up to Maine and pump him full of formaldehyde. Yeah. And he needs to be like a ravioli. Because a poisonous ravioli. But it's like...
Not decomposed, because then that's not him.
That's not him.
It shows what we attach identity to.
Exactly. So that it also has me thinking about like, why are we so opposed to the living death in the United States, but at the same time we're very open to embalming. If I have control over the dead body, if it's me, I have the inheritance. What did they leave me, right? And I want to quote like leaving, because that's the idea of like that person is gone forever. There's this giant like axe in the middle once a person dies, and that's it. Why'd they leave me, and what did they leave me? Like, it's such an obsession with the self, with like me.
Not
and
just
like
the self, sorry.
Not just the self, but just like
the future self. It's not even being like, am I happy? What do I want to do today? Am I hungry? Like, it's just like, oh no, but am I like? Alan Watts was talking about something on that, where like people can be completely content and happy and have everything they want, but it's, oh, but what if will I have it tomorrow? Will I be okay on Thursday? Will I, it's the myth of, of security, of, oh, I'll be okay forever if I just, suffer now, throw my life away now, because, to try to keep things constant. The illusion that the future will be better versus making today better.
Yeah. And it has me thinking...
The future's always tomorrow. Shout out to Annie.
The living death.
Yes.
The living death. What does that mean? Why are we so opposed to the living death? It got me thinking about how in other cultures, there's like sort of more shrines. Like shrines are these like, living things, like flowers and like, having to light the incense, like going up in person, like acknowledging this person, right? We're really opposed to that, I feel. Like, we kind of like, and as well, like, we're really opposed to color in funeral work. Because, the first image that it evokes is literally like, this black and white image of like the 1800s where nothing much has changed.
Everything about
and look at
is
this.
Always old.
Yeah, it's just like the same thing is essentially what we're doing in like modern funerals, because this is kind of like the TV depiction of a funeral, right? And
also figure most people in the West nowadays don't experience death in real life. Excuse me. It's gonna be experienced through media. So they're gonna have all of these, exaggerated ideas of violent, gruesome deaths, which, may happen, depends what kind of life you lead, but it's it makes it this very unrealistic thing to be feared.
It had me thinking about how do we approach people that, how do we think of people that embrace death? Why is the emergency line calling me?
No. Gotta go save the world.
I gotta go save the world. So, to end this off, we kind of are very resistant to people that embrace death. So, like, you know, like, we always think of, like, the Addams Family, for example. Like, they're foreign, right?
Yeah.
The final point is our sort of, our judgment of people that embrace death, right? And I think that transcends cultures, and because we kind of like refuse to want color, we refuse to want to talk about death in the United States. You leave here, everybody wants to acknowledge the fact that the spirit or the essence of person is something that stays.
But you can't tax the spirit, so
You can't tax the spirit.
Why would they? Why would Western capitalism ever really want to embrace that, or like a living connection to the spirit or the soul, versus just it being something post-death? Humorously, I don't know.
Humorously. The Alan Watts death video ended off with another interesting like quote, which was, "Regard yourself as dead already, so that you have nothing to lose."
Yes, and if not to get a little dark, but I mean, we've lived spicy lives.
We've lived spicy lives,
things.
yeah.
I've definitely tried to undo myself to end things on multiple occasions, but the last of which, I mean, you kind of, helped me out of. But that was my sort of takeaway from that, which is like if, it could have went through, I could have been dead at that point, but I'm not, so like, why not just go as hard as I can for myself and see where I can get.
Right.
And like, bro, you see where I'm at with boxing.
I feel it.
Like, it's barely over a year and I'm already sparring and stuff. And I didn't even think that was a possibility. But yeah, essentially, if you just say like, what's the worst that can happen?
Right.
That hasn't already happened. Yeah. When you embrace death, you can do anything, which is, it's then so scary to people in charge. They don't want peasants who can do anything, who understand that they in themselves are God because they have the ability to have choice and decision and perspective.
Choice, decision, perspective.
The ability to change. The ability to be one with impermanence.
To do what you want without guilt.
Yeah, to realize that, like, we're never really going to end because we never really had a beginning. We're the same way that, like, I don't know, if I'm walking and, like, I see a cool rock or a neat-looking mushroom, I'm like, oh, a V, and I might take a picture for you or something. And, like, that'll continue after, however our relationship ends. If we break up, if we stay together till one of us dies, if we both die doing something fun, or, like, it's, identity isn't a thing, and like we don't exist purely within our bodies.
We don't.
We only do if we believe we do.
Yeah.
That's how you can get a lot of that stuff of why do you need to, enslave people to build a pyramid so people remember you, if you can just like be a kind of chill dude, and then it's like every time someone sees like a sunrise or like a sunflower or something, they're like, oh man, that's him, or like It's when you stop chasing what you want, you realize you already have it.
Yeah. Or even just realizing, like, the phenomenon of that, it will still transcend time. Of, like, whether or not it is us that find that, oh, this reminds me of you, Maybe someone 3,000 years, maybe this, like, alien life form that lives billions of years from now, like, have that same connection. And I think that's life. And that's what continues the cycle of life. Like, and because the self doesn't exist, it's really just the essences that we bring into this collage of being. And that's embracing death. These are my sources. Caitlin Doty's awesome. Her channel's pretty cool. Alan Watts is sick. Erin Kidd, really nice. Theology of Conceptual Mapping. The body, bro. How'd the body do the spiritual stuff? How do we associate that? But, yeah. Thank you so much for joining me, Elliot.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, man. This is great. I hope you have a great day, Brian. Be Jack. Whoop whoop.
Yep.
Yep.